I was the DJ slash MC for my uncle's wedding, and I learned 5 different things that I'm going to teach you. Before the wedding, I had a phone call with the bride and the groom, and I had a document. I've got this really long document where it's full of questions about the reception and the ceremony and the guests and who's going to be there and their music preferences. So I had them fill that out. I had a phone call with them to talk through everything. I coordinated with the wedding coordinators to make sure that I was going to be there at the right time where I could set up everything. I had to figure out the equipment and make sure that all of the equipment was ready to go. And then during the actual day of the wedding, I arrived several hours before the wedding started, set up all of the equipment, made sure that everything was good to go. And then I played the music and made announcements for the ceremony. I made announcements leading into the cocktail hour. I played music for the cocktail hour. And then I played music and made announcements throughout the night and throughout the day for the actual reception itself. So all of that is a lot of work. And if you're ever going to DJ MC, or if you're planning your own wedding and you're thinking about who should I hire, or you're thinking about, do I just have a friend or a family member do this for me? Here's some things to think about. And here's the 5 things that I've learned through this process. Now, a quick side note is I have been a professional DJ MC for about 10 years now. So there's a lot of things that I have learned before this. But these are 5 lessons that are fresh from this actual event, from this actual wedding, and from all of the time that I spent pouring into this wedding in order to make it fun and in order to make it great. So as I mentioned, I DJ MC'd this wedding for free. Now, I have been a paid contractor, a paid wedding DJ for several other weddings before this. As I've said, I've done hundreds of events before, primarily in the corporate event world, but I've also done a lot of weddings. And so for this wedding, it was a gift for my uncle, technically my wife's uncle, but I'm not gonna go down that route. So my uncle's wedding, it was a gift for them, me doing the DJ MC, providing the equipment, all of it was a gift for them. And so with it being something that I was doing for free, I wanted it to be very budget friendly on my side because I wasn't getting paid for this event. And so one of the things that I learned is that and let me emphasize that word need, you don't need the most expensive microphones for your wedding. And here's what I mean by this. I knew that I was going to be DJing, MCing more events after this because of my own passions and projects. And so I wanted to go ahead and buy my own microphone kit, which I did. This is the Phoenix Pro system. And inside this kit, when you open it up, I wasn't expecting that. When you open it up inside, you'll see that inside the kit, there are multiple microphones, and this is the microphone receiver. So this is a 2-pack combo where this one has 2 separate microphones. It's got 2 separate outputs on it. And so with this microphone set, I can have a handheld microphone and I can have a microphone pack, which then this has a cord that goes to either a lapel microphone, which clips on the shirt, or you can use this microphone, which we chose not to do at this wedding because I didn't want the officiant to look like they were teaching a Zumba class. Not that there's anything wrong with Zumba classes, I just didn't want that for the pictures of the wedding. And you can see in this text message that I even texted them the day of saying, hey, I don't want you to look like you're teaching a Zumba class, so we're gonna go ahead and clip the lapel microphone onto your shirt. In my previous career of being a professional MC and a professional DJ, I'm used to renting really nice equipment or working for a company that owned really nice equipment. And while this system is still really nice, it is not as nice as you can get on the higher end. I'm used to using microphones from a company by Shure, which is spelled S-H-U-R-E, and those microphones range in the hundreds to thousands of dollars range. And as I said, this was a gift for my uncle and for his bride. And so I wanted the event to be very nice. I wanted them to be heard and I wanted everything to be crystal clear, but I didn't want to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on microphones, which I will probably do in the future, but I just needed something to get me by for this event and for more until I can build up my bank account and then invest it into even nicer microphones. So this microphone set only cost $123 on Amazon using some kind of coupon and using some kind of discount that was going on. And if I were to buy a Shure microphone set for the that had both the microphone pack as well as the handheld tied into the same system, then it would cost about $800. So this was about $650 worth of savings, and I will say that these microphones worked great, and I have already used them in an event since then, so my investment is already paying off. The second thing that I learned DJing and emceeing this wedding was that in organizing and preparing for the event, I learned that Spotify allows you to organize playlists into folders. And here's what I mean by that, is in Spotify, you've probably already picked up that you can create your own playlists. You can go to other people's playlists, you can search for music that you want or that somebody else's want, and you can add it to a playlist. And then if you have a premium account, you can download the playlists, which if you wanna see how to do that, you can check out a previous video, which I'll put the card in a link above. But what can happen is that as you are creating these playlists, maybe you forget which ones are for this event and which ones are for your personal use and which ones are for someone else's event. And so I learned a really handy trick, which is that Spotify allows you to organize your playlists into folders. So here you can see on the left side of the screen, you can see that all of the playlists that I've created under the Event Builder account are all right here. And then right here, you can see that it says Roger/Sandra wedding. This is the wedding that I DJ'd for my uncle and his bride. And you can see that I have all of the playlists organized right here. So I created one playlist per moment. So I've got ceremony seating, ceremony, cocktail hour, reception, entrance, dinner, special dance, cake cutting, garter bouquet, and the last dance. And they're all separated out into separate playlists so that when I click on them, you can see that here is the playlist for the ceremony seating. Here's the one for the actual ceremony itself. Here is for the cocktail hour, and so on and so forth. So in order to create a playlist folder, all you have to do is come to the file portion of Spotify, hit new playlist folder, and then there is a new folder that appears, which you can then rename however you want to. So I'm going to right click on it, hit rename, and I'm going to rename this testing for YouTube. And then underneath this, I can create new playlists, or I can drag and drop other playlists into a certain folder. So let's say, for example, I want to rename this one my 4th of July playlists. Hit enter, and then I'm going to drag and drop this into the folder. And now, if you can see, I can click it, hide it. I'm gonna drag and drop that one there also. So now I've got one folder for all of my 4th of July playlists. The 90s one doesn't fit there, so I'm gonna move that out right there. So I've got Rogers and Sandra's, which I can hide, and I've got 4th of July, which I can hide and show as well. The third thing that I learned during this event is that if you have two different spaces, it is very, very nice to have two different sets of sound equipment. We had an outdoor venue and an indoor venue. So at the same location, on the same property, we had an outdoor space where it was a big roof and there were rows and it was a beautiful scene where people can get married outside. And then inside was where the reception was gonna take place. That's where the air conditioning was, because this was in Florida in June. And so we needed two separate sound equipment setups in two separate spaces. Now again, I was on a budget. I didn't feel like renting or buying any more equipment than was absolutely necessary. And so what I did is I set up the equipment outside at the ceremony, and then during the cocktail hour, as soon as the ceremony was over, I packed it up and I moved it inside to the cocktail hour. Now, here's why this presented a problem, is that I was just doing this on my own, and I did have some extra guests that they were very friendly, they were very helpful, they offered to help carry stuff inside. But when the guests moved from the ceremony into the reception, or into the reception space and the cocktail hour space, well, there was a lull in the music. There was no music start playing at first because I hadn't had a chance to move the equipment up there yet. So if you want a really seamless one where there's no awkward silence, where there's no necessarily downtime in the event itself, then make sure that you have at least one sound equipment for each space that your guests are going to be in. So if you have 3 different spaces, you need 3 different sets of sound equipment. Or you need to design your event in such a way that if you have people in one space and they move to another one, then after they move to the other one, you can pack one up. So let's say, for example, you have a ceremony and you have a cocktail hour in a different place, and then you have a reception in place number 3. Then what can happen is you have a sound equipment number 1 set up in your location for your ceremony. Then you have sound equipment set up in location number 2 for your cocktail hour. So they move from the ceremony to the cocktail hour. And then while they're in the cocktail hour, you move the equipment from the ceremony to the reception space so that there's no downtime, and so that the people, while they're there, it's getting set up, it's getting ready. And then when they make that transition next from the cocktail hour to the actual reception, now you've got sound equipment ready to go there. Now, my uncle's wedding still went great, but there was that downtime, and it did make me a little bit more sweaty and a little bit more rushed through the event. So it's not necessarily a need to have, but it would be nice to have. The fourth thing that I learned during this event is that line dances like the Cupid Shuffle, the Cha-Cha Slide, the Wobble, the Wop, all of these different songs that when you play it, people automatically know what dance to do. They are still great ways to get people back on the dance floor or on the dance floor to start. Throughout the event, there were periods where people would be on the dance floor and then they would go and get food, or they would go and get drinks, or they would go and take pictures. And so then the dance floor would clear out, and then if you turn on another line dance song, then people will come back to the dance floor. And so sometimes there's people who prefer not to choose to play these songs, which is perfectly fine. That's your personal preference. But if you want to have the dance floor rocking throughout the night and throughout the day during different times, then I recommend using these as tools to get people back to the dance floor. And don't just automatically discredit them because you don't like it, because it's partly about what you like, but it's also partly about what will your audience like. So be sure to use these line dances as a way to get people back to the dance floor, and use them as a tool in your tool belt when designing your wedding experience. And the fifth and final thing that I learned during this wedding is that if you have an earlier wedding where the sun has not set yet, do not expect most of your guests to be dancing. Probably expect maybe half or less of them to be dancing. The atmosphere in the room and the atmosphere outside and the atmosphere of who your audience is will 100% dictate how many people are dancing and when they are dancing. So my uncle's wedding took place during the day. It was still bright outside. The sun didn't set until later that night. And so during the entire wedding, the sun was up and the room was very brightly lit. And so the ambiance on the room was very much like, hey, let's have fun. There were still people that were on the dance floor, but it was not a majority of the people. It was a smaller portion of the actual reception guests themselves. So in my professional recommendation, if you want to have dancing and you want to have a lot of dancing and you want to have a lot of your people dancing, then host your wedding reception after the sun goes down so that you can control the room so that it's darker in the room. You can turn on lights for the dance floor, but people just feel a little bit more comfortable when it's a little bit less brightly lit in the room with you. Now, a lot of these elements that I've covered in this video all greatly depend upon how you design your actual event. And if you want to be more productive and spend less time on the actual start of the agenda and more time on customizing it to how you want, then be sure to check out this video where I teach you how to use a free AI tool for how to save time and be more productive in order to create your event agenda, your outline, and start designing your event. It is a great tool and it makes it very, very easy during the beginning phases of your event planning process.